Hi everyone, this is Jenny Gaona, and I'm here to go over Activity 1 for the Educator's Guide in the Porch Talk, a conversation about archaeology in the Texas Panhandle. So Activity 1 is all about archaeology. What is archaeology? What do archaeologists do? And what does that mean for Texans and the history and what we know about people of the past? So the objective for this activity is for students to define what is an archaeologist and explain why their job is important for the understanding of the people who lived here before us. So the standards on Activity 1 are on the bottom of page 1 to tie it to your Texas state standards. For the Educator's Guide page, you have 3 handouts on your materials list. We have a Venn diagram that goes along with your reading strategy, speaking with an expert handout, and then the questions for archaeologists. The reading strategy for this activity is for students to fill in the Venn diagram as they read through the information to compare the role of a rancher versus an archaeologist. So rancher would be John Erickson versus archaeologist Doug Boyd. So what are the roles of these two gentlemen when it comes to digging into this land and finding out information about people of the past? The activity instructions are for each student to analyze the definition of archaeologist. After they have analyzed that definition that is provided for them, then they write their own in their own words. Then they can work in small groups to form a list of tools about what do you think archaeologists need in order to complete their job. So they can read and react with lists from other peer groups. You could do a table walk or some other collaborative activity for them to share what their list looks like and for them to add on to their list as they go through and get information from their peers. Last but not least, they could then create questions either individually in small groups that they themselves would ask an archaeologist. So let's look at those handouts. Before we get started, the security briefing for this activity, you'll have the words of wisdom from Hank the Cowdog. So these are his instructions for kids, what he wants them to do, written in the personality of Hank the Cowdog. If you need a good hook or an engagement piece, I would highly recommend doing this as a read aloud with your students. The activity instructions are the same as I've already gone over with you, but these are written for students. So you could actually print out the security briefing page and have this at a station for your students to read and follow the instructions. Then it has a materials list for you. Next is the rancher versus archaeologist handout. This is to go along with the reading strategy. So they would do this as they read the section of the Porch Talk book. So they'd fill in the Venn diagram. What does a rancher do? What does an archaeologist do? And then do some comparisons. Are there any things that they both do? That would be a good question that I would ask as a teacher. The next page is, they could do this individually or in small groups, is they write their own definition of an archaeologist. And then here is where they list what tools and resources do archaeologists need in order to do their jobs. Last but not least, here is the assessment piece that they can either do by themselves, once again individually, or with a small group. They have a list of sentence stems, and then they have to create sentences they would ask an archaeologist. Now, what is great with these for a teacher, you could have them use this table of sentence stems to write questions for points. So obviously, the more in-depth questions have the higher numbers on them. They're that bottom row. So the more questions they write that are a little bit more detailed, that are a little more difficult to finish that sentence stem, they have the higher numbers. So you could differentiate this activity by levels. Level 1 is the top row, level 2 is the middle row, level 3 is the bottom row, or you could just let students choose. However you want to do it, it's completely up to you. You know your students best. So that is Activity 1. Focusing on what is an archaeologist, what do they do, and how do they help us learn about people from the past. Thank you for listening. Bye.